Welcome. The League of Women Voters welcomes you to this panel presentation and discussion on the issue of homelessness. I'm sure most of you are aware that the League of Women Voters does not take political positions. They take policy positions. We do not support politicians one way or another, but we do act on policy decisions. The person who put this together is the head of our team that addresses issues of homelessness, Trish Warner. She's not able to be here tonight, but she is the one that we are grateful for putting this together. We will have two speakers, both from the Homeward Alliance. Each of them will speak and answer questions for each speaker, and you can put them in the chat or raise your hand, and I will, once each one gives their presentation, then we will address the questions. The first speaker is David Rout, who is the executive director with the Homeward Alliance. He's been the executive director since 2014. And under his leadership, it's grown from a grassroots agency into the region's leading nonprofit addressing homelessness. He's overseen the development of a comprehensive continuum of programs that serve families, adults, and seniors from basic needs to housing-focused care management and employment. He also leads its technical arm, which focuses on strategies and best practices aimed at getting to a region where homelessness is rare, brief, and non-recurring. That's our goal. He holds a Master of Social Work from CSU and represents Homeward Alliance on multiple task forces and boards around the area that are dedicated to housing and homelessness solutions. David, go ahead.
Thank you for the introduction. Thanks for having me. I think it might be worth just introducing Sandra as well too, because I was going to go through a brief presentation to start, and she was going to do a couple of the slides. But
okay, I would be happy to do that.
Sure.
Sandra Wright is the Systems Strategy Director at Homeward Alliance. She represents the technical arm in high-level strategic initiatives across the region. She's responsible for driving systemic change using practices that aim to prevent and intervene in homelessness. She engages with a broad spectrum of stakeholders to help community collaboration and ensure that different groups work together. She served as executive director of the Loveland's Community Kitchen for 7 years, where she was responsible for leadership there, strategy, and vision. We are very lucky to have both of you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So as I said, I was just going to start with a brief presentation that really just focuses on mainly what Homeward Alliance does, and just some general overview about homelessness, and we can give some sort of more specific updates. But we assumed there'd be probably a robust question and answer, so we wanted to leave ample time for that. And I would also say I am keeping an eye on the chat in the corner of my screen. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and also feel free to interrupt me. But I'm going to share my screen as I go through this just for a minute here, a few minutes. Can you all see the presentation? Our
yes.
logo. Okay. So Homeward Alliance was founded in 2008. So we've been around for about 17 years. We were founded with a singular program and mission, and that was to collect and distribute life-saving supplies to people who are homeless, primarily in Fort Collins, but also in Loveland. At the time when we were founded, we were all volunteer run. Actually, I was not a part of our founding, I should clarify. I came on a few years later. Anyways, our founder spent the first couple of years building relationships in the community, sort of getting to know the issue, getting to know a lot of the people who are homeless, getting to know agencies that were serving people who are homeless. And really what we did for those, what he did, I should say, for those first couple of years was collect supplies and then send them to other agencies that would distribute them to the clients that they were serving. So sort of filling in a gap where agencies wanted to be able to distribute life-saving supplies to people who they were serving, but it wasn't necessarily their core mission. You know, if you're an overnight shelter, your core mission's overnight shelter. You're not necessarily thinking about, you know, a coat for someone when they leave. And so that was the original gap we filled. We have grown quite a bit over the years, and I'll talk more about that later. But essentially, we've grown now to be both a much larger provider of services that provides everything from basic needs to long-term housing-focused assistance. In addition, we are involved in numerous technical efforts related to sort of addressing homelessness on a systemic level and recommending and trying to implement best practices and policies that we know based on research and experience from communities locally and around the country work to make homelessness rare, short-lived, and non-recurrent. So just briefly here, I'm going to just talk about homelessness, what it means by definition. And we talk about this. You can read on the screen the different categories of homelessness, but I just think the important takeaway here is that there are multiple definitions of homelessness, and that can be confusing. Primarily, it can be confusing when you're asked the question, how many people are experiencing homelessness on at any given time over the course of the year. And the biggest difference that you will hear is the definition, those first two things, and literally homeless and literally homeless is actually a definition used by the federal government, individual or family who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. That is, generally speaking, if you read, like, for example, HUD put out a report that said homelessness had risen across the country this year. That is based on that definition, literal homelessness. The broader definition includes people who are doubled up in households where they're, not intended to be doubled up, staying in hotels, staying in essentially unstable living situations, but still with roofs over their heads. That definition obviously is a broader definition, and when you include that, the numbers of people who experience homelessness is much broader. So just to give you a really simple example of that, in any given year, between the Thompson and Poudre school districts across Larimer County, we're seeing about 2,000 or so students who meet that definition of that second definition I gave you, where they're doubled up, they're sleeping with friends or family, they're in a motel, that sort of thing, or literally homeless. Of those 2,000, about 83%, I think 2 years ago was 83%. I haven't seen the most recent data, but 83% of those 2,000 roughly students were the second definition. The other 17% were the literally homeless definition. So easier way to think about that is most families who experience homelessness in our communities are experiencing that second definition, where they might be able to get a roof over their head, but it's not a stable one. And most individuals are experiencing that first definition of literal homelessness, where they're actually out on the streets and their cars are in the shelters. See, there's some this is some local demographic data. Excuse me, and when I say local, I mean countywide. So people, just as a sort of general rule of thumb, people experiencing homelessness run the gamut in terms of demographics. But what we see consistently in every community across the country is that the population of people who are homeless is disproportionately comprised of people from historically marginalized populations, people of color, people living with disabilities, the LGBTQ plus community. And you can see some, you can see some data here on 6% are veterans. That's actually a very low rate for a community, and it's because our community has made, our entire region, I should say, Larimer and Will counties have made really significant progress toward ending veteran homelessness, much more progress than any other population. So you would actually expect that number to be higher in a lot of other communities. But you can see that 63% of the people we're serving identify themselves, and I say we, I mean across the county, all agencies entering into a common data system identify themselves as living with a physical disability, 12% with a developmental and cognitive disability, 51% with a mental health disorder, and in many cases, both physical disabilities and mental health disorders. 24% experiencing chronic homelessness. That means that a person has been homeless for a year or longer, or multiple instances adding up to a year, and has a disabling condition. So that is actually a disproportionately high percentage of our local population that is experiencing chronic homelessness relative to other locations. going to turn this one over to Sandra.
As we talk about what the primary causes of homelessness are, one of the things that come to all of our mind is just a lack of affordable housing. We all see that within our communities and what is available. People are struggling to find affordable places to live. They're struggling to qualify for those apartments or low-income housing or what have you. We hear countless stories within Homeward Alliance and within our agencies who we're partnering with, that rents are raised unexpectedly and people are not able to make that high of a jump on that, and are truly entering into homelessness because of that lack of affordable housing. I think I just want to comment on here that in our finite minds, right, we think that homelessness is a set number. And as long as we can reduce that, we're doing fine. And that is what we're aiming for. However, it is a pattern and it's a cycle. People go in and out of homelessness. And so even if there is a belief that if we stop offering services and just make it other communities' problems, that all homelessness will go away. Well, guess what? People enter into homelessness every day. And when you have diverse housing options in a community, people are going to be entering into homelessness. We see more homelessness in Loveland versus Windsor, for example, because of the diverse housing that's available there. People typically who live in more in communities that don't have those type of living situations available to them will downsize to communities like Loveland that have opportunities for that. And so then it is common for people to become homeless in Loveland. Poverty, 1 in 10 Coloradans live in poverty overall. And of course, in marginalized populations, that rate increases. Discrimination, we see low-income renters facing that discrimination from the landlords on a weekly and monthly basis. Just the lack of affordable health care. When you think about how difficult it is to be seen in a timely manner and to have insurance that covers the things that you need and whatnot. Poor health causes homelessness. And then finally, domestic violence. People who are having to leave situations that are not safe for them also leads to homelessness.
I have 2 questions so far for both of you. One is, does the data, why does it not include substance abuse as a cause? And also, do we have data on the elderly? Those are 2 questions that have come up for either of you.
I think I'm gonna answer just kind of a first one, and then I'm gonna turn it over to David to give a more robust answer. But you know, the majority of our substance users are housed, and substance use and different problems that affect communities as a whole, it's really difficult to put those related just to homelessness, as we are facing those problems as a community as a whole. And so I just want to bring that to light too, because it's not something that people often think about. Even if you think about people in vulnerable situations like those experiencing homelessness, being put into really, really dire choices on having to choose whether or not to make specific decisions just to survive. I just want to put that into context. And David, do you want to go ahead and answer those other questions?
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great context, and it's always important to remember that what you just said, that we're not just talking about people experiencing homelessness with those issues, because there certainly is a stigma. But I think to the broader point, absolutely, it is of course a cause of homelessness, and could certainly be added to this list as one of the causes of homelessness, and something that's worsened, of course. And we all know that. I mean, I think we all know that this is something that's worsened the opioid crisis across the country. So absolutely, it's a factor, and it's also a factor as to why people continue to be homeless when they're homeless. So it's a cause, and it's an ongoing cause of not being able to escape homelessness. The other thing I was going to add, sort of related to this slide, and I will get to the senior question, but just the lack of affordable housing sort of goes hand in hand with would be remiss if I didn't mention employment, because for the overwhelming majority of people in the world, employment is the ticket to housing, making money and getting housing. And obviously there is a segment of the population of people who are homeless that has, disabling conditions, things that might prevent them from in the short term gaining employment or retaining employment, or maybe even permanently. But the majority of people, employment is the ticket out. But what we have seen in the data, and I don't have an exact percentage, I can tell you that I think like 8 years ago we did a survey, and I think half of the people who we surveyed across Larimer County who were homeless said they had at least some form of employment. I don't know if that percentage is I'm not going to stand by that percentage. That was something that was done literally 8 years ago. But the point I'm trying to make, the broader point, is that the cost of living is higher than wages allow in general across Loveland, Fort Collins, across Larimer County, really northern Colorado. And the problem continues to worsen where wages just aren't keeping pace with the cost of living here. And there are many reasons as to why that is the case, but it is obviously a factor. As far as seniors, I would like to get back to you with some exact numbers of how many seniors who are homeless. I don't know that off the top of my head, the percentage of seniors, but I can get you an answer to that question. And actually, I can get it before we're done with this meeting.
I'm not aware of any other questions at this point.
Okay. So yeah, we really talked about these. But
Yeah.
one statistic that I think is there's a typo here. This is not 250,000. This is 225,000. I just want to clarify that right there. But in Larimer County, more than half of households are cost burdened, which means they spend more than 30% of their household gross income toward housing costs. And then severely cost burdened would be spending more than at least half of income. That's 27%. And so you can see there, studies show that communities where households spend more than 32% of their income on housing should expect a rapid increase in homelessness. That's a growing problem here. So I'm going to talk a bit about Homeward Alliance and the services we provide.
David, before you do
Yes,
that,
please.
Connie has one question which I'm unable to read. So if you could speak it out, Connie.
Sorry, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. So my question is, since Loveland's contract with Homeward Alliance was canceled and the link to the Loveland Homeless Services was deleted from the Homeward Alliance website, and Loveland already has a resource center and various other services in operation, why isn't Homeward Alliance putting their time and money into supporting those existing groups' efforts instead of starting something new that will in some ways compete with our existing organizations? And with money so tight right now, where would the money be coming from to fund this? Thank you.
Thanks.
You might specifically be asking about the proposed location for a 24/7 resource center, Connie. And for that, we're going to get to Loveland in a few more slides, and we'll be talking that through. But to answer your question quickly, is that the Loveland Resource Center nor the South Road facility were never designed as a homelessness response. They are encampment responses, and it is not anything that was recommended by any experts in this room, nor by city staff. City Council at the time chose to create an encampment ban and to move forward with creating sites that would be strictly focused just on making sure that people didn't die, but not on helping them escape homelessness.
Oh,
And then
Sandra,
we'll get back to your questions. I think it's important to finish this conversation. We'll get back to your questions in a couple of slides, but we will be addressing those.
Yeah, but to clarify, I was not referring to the church center. I was referring to I think it's House of Neighborly Service Resource Center. And if you look at what they provide, it's a lot of the similar services that have been referenced before.
We work really closely with House of Neighborly Services, and services that are provided complement each other. There's not necessarily, of course, there's some redundancy as far as House of Neighborly provides food, Food Bank provides food, Salvation Army provides food, Community Kitchen provides food, Homeward. Like, we are meeting people where they are and making sure that there is a relationship of trust created, because that is the only way that we get to help people and get to actually make substantial change within their lives as far as them becoming moving forward on their path to sufficiency. But you can feel free to ask House and Neighborly Service, and they have a great working relationship with us. They do not provide some of the basic things that we do. If you talk to them, they're about less than 10% of those that they serve are experiencing homelessness, and they are focused primarily on those who are living on the brink of homelessness and really meeting some basic needs as far as food and clothing, and then some light case management is concerned. They do, of course, operate the Life Center, which is the home to several nonprofits. So we have Neighbor to Neighbor that is working with rental payments and various things. We have the Matthews Clinic, St. Matthew's Clinic there, that is helping to provide health care. So the nonprofits are very much working together to combat the various needs in the community.
Okay, I didn't want to derail your presentation, so thank you.
No, thanks for the question. Homeward Alliance, just broadly speaking, it has sort of two primary functions. We're a service provider. That's by far the largest part of what we do. And then we also have a couple of technical roles. And so what you're seeing here is an overview of our programs. And as I said earlier, our programs are designed to meet a continuum of needs, everything from basic needs to long-term support. So just to name a couple of them, or you can see them listed here, but we have some of our basic needs programs. We still have our original program, distributing supplies. Community programs refers to a couple of programs that are run exclusively by volunteers, bike repair, mobile laundry. Our family services program is a program where we provide bilingual resource navigation to families in need, and provide a lot of financial assistance, rent and security deposit assistance when other agencies we work really closely with Neighbor to Neighbor on that one to make sure that when we provide rent assistance or any sort of financial assistance, it's in coordination with other agencies that are larger than us that do that sort of as their core mission. So we're kind of a gap filler in family services. Reentry is a state-funded initiative. There's about 40 nonprofits across the state that receive funding through a program known as Work and Gain Employment and Education Skills. It's designed to help people exiting incarceration who have been identified as medium to high risk of recidivism by the Department of Corrections find employment and housing. Employment Services is our broader employment program. We've actually expanded the title. It's Employment and Resource Navigation Services. So that revolves mostly around helping people get jobs on the employment side. And then on the resource navigation side, it's about helping people connect to other resources in the community, and basically sort of like a centralized intake point for wherever our resource navigators are located. So conducting intakes and making sure people are referred to the appropriate services. And just for context, the Employment Services Program, we helped about 250 individuals obtain jobs last year. Resource navigation, we serve about 2,000 people a year at approximately a dozen locations across Fort Collins and Loveland. The Murphy Center for Hope is our hub of services in Fort Collins. That's a daytime resource center and day shelter. So it's open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. We operate that facility, and there's about a dozen or so agencies that provide other services. Homeward Alliance is one of the agencies that provides services, but about a dozen other agencies do at the Murphy Center.
David,
the Murphy Center is based in Fort Collins, but about 10% of the people we serve there are actually Loveland residents. Yes.
David, somebody's asked, where are these various services located? And
Yeah,
that would be very helpful. We'll probably need to look at this list again later so
Yes.
that people know and then can help others. But go ahead.
So our hub of services in Fort Collins is the Murphy Center, and then in Loveland, because Homeward Alliance doesn't actually have a hub. We provide services at various community locations depending on the population that we're serving, trying to target. So we have our resource navigation program is the easiest example. That one is located we actually have a resource navigator located at the Loveland Resource Center, the public library. Alternatives to Violence,
And Salvation.
and Salvation Army. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So those are our 4 primary locations in Loveland at the moment. We have had our employment program at the Life Center in the past. Primarily, the reason that we don't have that program there anymore is because of what Sandra was speaking to. We just serve different our target population just tends to be different. The Life Center is targeting people who are on the brink of homelessness, and we're targeting people who are homeless. So it just wasn't the right location for us. They're a great referral source for us though. So yeah, those are our primary Loveland locations. And in Fort Collins, it's very similar, except we have the Murphy Center, and then other locations are Crossroads Safe House, the public library, and a couple of other agencies across the community.
David, is there a place where all this stuff is written out? So is that some?
Oh, yes. I can send you some links and
Okay.
some handouts and things that you can use for sure.
Okay. So people could help by knowing those. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. So I think that and you know what, I'm not gonna this slide is not. I'll go to this slide because you talked about getting involved. There are a lot of ways to get involved with Homeward Alliance programs, and this is we're going to talk about the technical services stuff. I'll turn it over to Sandra in just a second, but in terms of our actual programs, that's really the way to get involved. Excuse me. Last year we had about 550 volunteers who supported our programs. Some of those volunteers were everyday volunteers in some cases, once a week, once a month. Sometimes one time. Actually, most of our volunteers are one-time volunteers. So few examples of ways you could help. I think one of the best ways to get involved, just as a starting point, is to attend one of our family resource fairs. We hold those a few times a year at locations across the county. Most recent one was at Life Spring Church in Loveland. We serve anywhere from 100 to 200 families at those events. We work in collaboration with dozens of other agencies that come and provide services or share information about their resources. But it's basically just a good introduction into sort of the population and a chance to meet the population we're serving, a chance to meet the agencies that also serve the same population. And it's a one-time event. So it's sort of a low risk opportunity. If you go to our website, homewardalliance.org, we have an up-to-date list, regularly updated list of volunteer opportunities, and you can also sign up directly on our website for those opportunities. So basically, you go to homewardalliance.org, and you'll have an option for both how to help and how to get help. If you click how to help, you're going to see volunteer opportunities and ways to donate, and if you click how to get help, you're going to see all of our different programs. But that is information that I will share with you by email. We're also on social media, Facebook and Instagram are primarily where we're posting right now. And we do have an upcoming event. I feel like that date might be actually wrong, but I will send a list of upcoming dates. But Project Homeless Connect is an annual event that takes place in Fort Collins. Loveland did one for years, and it has not happened in several years, but it's basically a one-stop shop service day for people who are homeless. And then those other 2 events are our fundraisers and awareness building events. But regardless, we have a robust calendar of volunteer activities and events to get involved with, not the vast majority of which are not fundraisers. And I say that because, there's always pressure at fundraisers. So yeah, lots of different ways to get involved.
That date is correct for this year's Project Homeless.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Sorry. Thank you.
no, that's fine. It's on Friday, April 18th. So
Thank you.
we get a lot of Loveland volunteers for that one too. It's great. We have a lot of people from Loveland coming to that event, and it's just a really great thing. Sorry, David.
No, I was just gonna say our sort of technical roles, and then I was gonna let you talk about Loveland specifically. Is that okay, Sandra? Okay. So a couple of over the last really over the last 5 or 6 years, we have gotten much more involved in some technical work related to the issue of homelessness. And that started and still revolves mostly around our regional continuum of care. And just a really, really brief explanation. A continuum of care is a planning entity that is designated by the federal government to oversee the response to homelessness within a region, a city, a state, depends on the location. Colorado is divided into 4 continuums of care, and we are part of the Northern Colorado Continuum of Care that's comprised of Larimer and Weld County. And one of our roles is we oversee the data system that is utilized by all of the agencies, or the vast majority of the agencies across the continuum of care. It is known as Homeless Management Information System, HMIS. The idea of that information is very simple. Have have a shared data system so that there's reduced duplication of services, easier data sharing, easier referrals, and also just sort of holistically giving us a better understanding of both the effectiveness of our interventions and the overall state of homelessness in our region and state. That is a role that we took on in 2020 when Northern Colorado actually became an official continuum of care. Prior to that, it was part of a broader continuum of care that was comprised of 50+ counties across the state. And then the other major technical role that we hold right now is we are leading the development of a strategic plan for addressing homelessness in Larimer County. I say leading, we are part of a task force. This will ultimately be a Larimer County plan. We have the county and a group of representatives from the various municipalities and our local United Ways selected a consulting firm that is doing a lot of the sort of technical work associated with actually developing the strategic plan, and we're doing a lot of the on the ground work to make it happen. So, like, for example, they're planning things like surveys and focus groups with key stakeholder populations, and we're on the ground sort of making those things happen. The result of that plan will be by the end of September of 2025, we believe there will be an actual strategic plan, and we hope that plan will be adopted by Larimer County officially. And then over the next year, we have a grant that will fund implementation of that plan, or some strategies around implementation. Not funding I'm sure the strategic plan is going to include many millions of dollars in recommended solutions to homelessness, because homelessness is a complex and expensive problem to solve. But we will have at least some small amount of money to begin the process of implementing some of these recommendations.
David, I know everybody online is thinking about this. To what extent do you need the Loveland City Council to participate in developing this plan?
Sandra can answer that, because they are involved. And I'm just going to unshare my screen, because we can talk about that. And hold on a second. How do I?
Sure. Part of working on the strategic plan is making sure that we are representing all of the stakeholders, and Loveland City Council has been reached out to. They've been sent some surveys. We've scheduled interviews, not we personally, Homeward Alliance, but it's our third-party consultant that we've hired to just collect all that data from everyone and how we're moving forward with that. And so we are all anxiously watching City Council right now. And not just for this issue, but for multiple issues, right? We all have different things that we have questions about and wonderings about. So, but moving forward, we do hope, as David stated, that this can be a plan that's adopted by the county and then is able to be implemented in the various municipalities themselves. So,
I think it's worth noting we have had participation from City Council.
Yeah.
In the process, so it's not just been attempts. We've actually had responses and engagement.
Yep. So then related to then related to Loveland. So back in the beginning of 2024, we really began to look for alternative funding for the providing technical services for Loveland. We knew with the budget crisis that the city was in, and the I believe it took all of 2024, all of that last Q4 to actually pass the budget for 2025, right? But just all of the questions around that, and then the mixed information that we were getting from leadership within council. It was just providing opportunities that would make us pause and think, what is the best way for us to be the most efficient and the most successful in making sure that we're aligning with our mission and staying true to what Homeward Alliance believes in and what our donors believe in, what our supporters believe in, and making sure that we can have like the greatest impact with that. And so thankfully, we were able to secure that funding. It took a little bit of time, but we were able to secure that. And that is, we left the lead agency contract with the city. Then our last date was in December of 2024. So then we were also working, city council back in 2023, there was a couple of key meetings related to homelessness. So there was a meeting in September of 2023 and then one again in December of 2023. September of 2023 was a study session. It was a facilitated discussion and talking about what city council wanted to make sure that we addressed as we were moving forward with our response to homelessness. And they spoke of a sustainable 24/7 resource center within the city limits and making sure that it was easily accessible and on a road, right? Making sure that we were looking at plans that included the city of Loveland as a partner, but an appropriate partner. So with the city of Loveland operating the Loveland Resource Center and the South Road facility, which are not, again, encampment ban response, not a homelessness response, but making lemonade out of lemons, if you will, right? And trying to do the best, the city trying to do the best they can with those properties. But how do we really exit the city from being a service provider, which it was not intended on doing, and put that back into the hands of the nonprofits? And so all of that information we took from that study session. And then in December of 2023, we had a long study session with City Council where we presented not only the work that Homeward Alliance had accomplished as lead agency, but also we talked about the task force that was formed then at that point and what its plans were for 2024 and moving forward to make sure that while during study sessions, council can't vote on anything, they can provide direction and make sure that we were on the right path and that people were in agreement. And then we talked about modifying the Unified Development Code because our code did not have anything within that would allow for any sort of overnight shelter for adults. And then also there was a summary of that September meeting from the city manager's office. And so it was a really robust panel of information that was provided. And what we got from that meeting was, yes, we need to move forward. This is a great plan. Move forward full speed ahead. We need to make sure, yeah, sure. September, David, would you mind looking up those dates real quick? Zeke Cortez is asking for that September 2023 and December 2023 meetings.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, obviously it's either on the 2nd or the 4th Tuesday of those months, because that's when those things happen. But anyway, Councilor Overcash at the time, he said, we need a campus of hope. Let's make sure we get that. And actually, in all transparency, if you go back and watch the meeting, City Council was truly building a Taj Mahal, if you will, of homeless services. And we were the task force was quick to respond and say, there's still limitations, right, and what we can do. And we want to make sure that our key services that are developing strategies that actually help people leave homelessness rather than just survive it are being implemented. So with that, the task force moved forward with identifying different things, addressing safety, street outreach developed out of this task force and making sure that we did that. We now have a partnership with Summit Stone, who is working closely with the Downtown Ambassador Program as far as street outreach is concerned. So that developed out of the task force. Understanding of where agencies would like to be as far as identifying potential operators of a shelter. And so we've been having those conversations, talking about funding. It became very clear really quickly that there would not be city funds available for any sort of capital purchase for a building. And so we worked towards that. We gathered information for a development fund. We created we hired a third party to do a community survey that not only posed our main arguments for a 24/7 resource center, but also the opposition's arguments to make sure that we had a fair representation. You know, there was polls going on both sides, petitions going on both sides, you know, sign this if you feel that. The problem with petitions is they tend to circulate within the same thinking, and we don't get this robust conversation about it then, and we don't get to have these conversations. And so we actually paid for a third-party survey. We were going to present all this at the city council meeting in December and didn't get a chance to do that. But really presenting the findings of that, within 3 days, we had over 1,200 residents of Loveland respond to this survey. And it was really, thank you, David, September 12th and December 12th, 2023 were the dates of those meetings. So, but respond to that. And actually we were quite encouraged because a 67% of people thought that, yes, Loveland needs to be doing something within the city limits and making sure that this is addressed. And 64%, I believe it was that people think that that Loveland, the city, needs to have some sort of part in this. They just can't be not engaged at all, as this is a community issue. And so it was really encouraging where we thought this is where the community was. It's you know, as we have our I use this example and I'm not sure if people like it, but if we have our extremists on both sides of the issues, right? Usually those in the middle, we can usually get things done, right? So just those types of things, that's what we were ready to present. So we were quite disappointed when we didn't get to present the information prepared for City Council. And it was a quasi-judicial process, it has been a difficult quasi-judicial process to maintain the integrity of that, especially for City Council, as people on both sides have been approaching them and wanting to talk about things. And we did have a couple of city councilors go on record saying that they were against the site prior to that hearing. We have our opposition who believes that also people in favor of it was. It just got very, very ugly, right? And this is not necessarily how we want to move forward. So after that meeting, and it was before any information was presented, it was decided to postpone it and to have these impact studies without any input from the applicant. It really caused the Homelessness Task Force, as well as First Christian Church, to take a pause and reassess things. And, you know, over the past year, we have spent over $100,000 going towards the direction that we were provided by City Council. And these are our donors' money. These are our supporters' money. This is not a City Council, or excuse me, the city as an organization funds. Like these are funds that were raised separately to pursue these because we believe so strongly in the cause. And as that was postponed, really the Homelessness Task Force met after that and just did not see a path forward that would really be wise use of any of our times. And City Council, if you watch City Council, we all know that it is definitely contentious. And with the new city manager that just came into place into December, beginning of January, things just need to settle down so we know how we can proceed. And so the task force at the time, they made the recommendation to the trustees at First Christian Church to pull the PUD, that it may not be worth more time pursuing. And so the church took that into consideration, and they made that decision to pull the PUD, as we all know that not making a decision is also making a decision. So, and then with that, the task force also agreed to disband, and those press releases were both sent out the end of January for that. So while we have not given up efforts in Loveland at all, these services are still so badly needed. And Loveland has been very antiquated as far as its responses to homelessness for the last 10 years. And I think sometimes I wonder if maybe no one expected us to be able to move this quickly, and this wouldn't have to be a decision that would have to be acted upon. And we wouldn't have brought millions of dollars to the table, and we wouldn't have brought a solution. We wouldn't have found potential partners that embraced housing first and work first. We wouldn't have found all these things that we did. We wouldn't have involved the community, or excuse me, the faith community. And we were able to accomplish all that as the Homelessness Task Force because we brought a lot of people together. We had the difficult conversations. We had the education meetings and just really brought that together. And we were able to accomplish a lot within that year. And so while we're disappointed in that, we're not giving up hope for Loveland. Our efforts are just shifting a little bit, even with the current administration as it is, and kind of the unknown as far as what programs are going to be cut and different things, and who this is going to affect. We are going to focus on what we can do and the help that we can be at a local level, and making sure that we're still making a difference in our community. David, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Just to respond, there was a question around the Longview Behavioral Health Facility as a possibility, and there's really two reasons, and it did. One of them was actually, what is the response that was given is just really very simply that the lack or the gap is shelter in Loveland. There is not a lack of shelter near the Longview Behavioral Facility. The answer to the need for a shelter in Fort Collins is not to build a new shelter in the lack of a shelter in Loveland is not to build a new shelter in Fort Collins. Shelters in general are successful when they're near where people are. It's why there's a shelter. It's why there's multiple shelters in Fort Collins. It's why there's a shelter in Greeley. Basically, what in an ideal sort of response system since we have a regional continuum of care, an ideal response system would include sites that serve individuals in the locations where they actually live, and then coordination at the regional level. But we do not need a shelter that serves the region. We already have shelters in the other municipalities. And the other answer is actually a simpler answer, which is that it was a taxpayer initiative to have a behavioral health campus, and they have other plans for that facility that don't involve homelessness, that are specific to what the taxpayers voted for. So they have said loud and clear, county commissioners have said loud and clear that it's not in alignment with, not only is it not what they think is best for the city of Loveland, for the community, but it's not what that project was designed to be.
Yeah, I also think it's worth noting that it was an idea and a suggestion by a group of people. It was not a vetted property. It did not go through the steps that, for example, we went through with the First Christian Church building. So it was an idea that someone had, and we're happy to definitely entertain those ideas. But I think it also goes along, there is a small percentage of Loveland who really believe that this is the county's problem. Where is the county in this? The county needs to be, let's put it on county land, right? And that is the thinking behind it, but those conversations are not developed, and it was not, there just wasn't any data behind that. Also, any nonprofits providing services, they go to where people are. and people are not on the outskirts of town looking for services. People are engaged within our communities, shopping at the same places that you and I shop at, going to the same doctors that you and I go to, working at the same places that our community is working at. So there's several reasons why that wouldn't necessarily work from our point of view, but also from an opposition point of view, it was not a vetted location either.
And Sandra, you might know the answer to Linda's question here around, and I sorry, I just want to acknowledge, I see there's there's sort of like a disagreement in the chat about the survey that went out. Just for context, it was, I'm not going to discount how anybody feels about it, felt about the survey itself, but just for people's information, it was done by Magellan Data.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just had something in my throat. Magellan Data and Mapping Strategies, which is an independent organization or a polling organization, I should say, based in Broomfield, Colorado.
They're
And we went,
often involved. Loveland's familiar with Magellan. They're
okay,
involved in political issues
Yeah,
on
a lot of
both
political polling.
sides. Yeah, and so it's definitely a reputable third party for that. So,
But not to discount the opinion. But the question on
No.
the question on the total number of people who use shelter services, I don't know if I can tell you, I can't look at individual like agency. If it's not my program, I can't like look at an individual agency's data specifically. I can see that there were 816 people served by any agency across the entire city of Loveland over the course of the whole year. Sandra, do you know? And I can also see just in Loveland, just for context, about 300 people a quarter, it looks like, that are served across the whole across the city. But I think that's, I'm sorry, sorry.
Know. I'm sorry, Linda. I don't know that statistic offhand. So I know anecdotally in Loveland, the conversation is very much around that there is a lot of people that are elderly using the services, specifically in Loveland. David's just put a link in the chat.
That's where I'm pulling the data that I'm citing as I'm talking. I'm looking at some of these data tables, and in particular, I was looking at this next one that I'm going to put in the chat. That's it's a public. If you click on it, it's automatically going to show you data from the last quarter of 2024, but you can tinker with it and look at it by city. You can look at it by, actually, you can look by housing outcomes too on the second tab of that second one. But anyways, that's what I was playing around with to give you the data that I just gave you.
David, there was one question about was there data and conversations with the Loveland Police Department about what they would need to provide additional services?
Sorry, I missed that.
Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead. Sorry. I'm sorry I missed that question. Go ahead, Sandy.
Yeah, we had multiple conversations with the Loveland Police Department. They were also on the homelessness task force when that was meeting, and had great engagement. And with them, there was comments made that having a one site versus the multiple sites that is currently in Loveland would be ideal for that. And then there was a lot of, in all transparency, there was a lot of, I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of organizations, a lot of concern about having to pick a side, if you will, in this fight, as it got really contentious and heated. And there was a lot of fear mongering. And I'm not saying that fears don't exist, but as we're looking to be making some really difficult decisions for our community, it was just a tough thing for people to be able to talk through. So the question is
Paul, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, the question is, did Homeward Alliance actually purchase the First Christian building? And if so, will they sell it now, and are there other properties being considered for shelter? Homeward Alliance was never in an agreement to purchase the First Christian Church facility. There was going to be another nonprofit started that owned that building. Homeward Alliance doesn't have, we're not an overnight shelter service provider. And it was never our intent to be the operator of this site. We talked to organizations such as Catholic Charities, Salvation Army, the Rescue Mission,
Life Center,
Bridge House.
House Neighbor Service.
I'm sorry?
And House and Neighborly Services, of course, too,
And
just
House
to
Neighborly
make
Service,
sure.
yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Like all of these different organizations to gauge their interest in doing it. So there were so that building, like we are not representing First Christian Church at all. And so that contract was through that other agency as well as the church. And as of today, I don't have an official word as far as what is happening with that.
And I
Do you-
think,
are you-
and
do
I
you
think to
work-
answer your question, there's not another building like being considered at this very moment.
That's right.
Some of us toured, a number of groups toured the landing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I thought a piece of good news might be welcome.
Yeah, the landing is fantastic news. The Matthews House is overseeing the landing, which is a regional youth shelter there in Loveland, and they've been open now for a few weeks, and intakes are going a little bit slow here at the beginning. I know that they're partnering with a lot of different nonprofits, including Kids Pack and Community Kitchen, and they work closely with Family Services with Homeward Alliance, and so it's a wonderful thing that is happening there, and we were very excited about that. David, do you want to add anything for that? I don't know if you talked to Nicole more recently than I have.
It's just a big gap that's being filled. I mean, we in our programs have always served youth sort of just because, I mean, when I say youth, I mean 18 to 21. We don't serve, like in a lot of our employment programs, our day shelter, we know people who are 18 to 21 have been staying at shelters in Fort Collins, Loveland, Greeley for years. And the reality is that I can just say we as an agency, I'm not going to disparage other agencies, but I'll say Homeward Alliance is not the agency to serve youth. That is not our specialty, just like overnight shelter is not our specialty. And to have an organization like the Matthews House, which in my opinion is among the best run and most successful agencies in terms of producing outcomes for the community in all of Northern Colorado, for them to step into this space, I think will transform our ability to respond to youth homelessness.
To answer Connie's question about how much money was actually confirmed for the Loveland shelter and what percent of that was federal money, we had not gotten down the path of the federal funds yet because the shelter was not in operations yet, and there were several steps that needed to occur before then. And so what we had done was secure $4 million in donation to help with the purchase price of the building, as well as some additional funds, and then also funds to the $100,000 to be really focused on vetting different properties over the past year.
Thanks for that question, Chuck. The balanced impact study. The question is, the issue was tabled before it was heard by City Council. It was a highly contentious issue. The council may have preferred to avoid it tabled in order to do an impact study. Would you have felt comfortable giving the council guidance on who might do a balanced impact study? Truthfully, I wouldn't feel comfortable because I don't know of any other impact study that is done I felt like the guidance was extremely broad. It was an impact study in many different areas that they were looking for. And I have never seen such a study conducted in any other community. And so I did reach out to several consultants and experts who I've worked with in the field. And the collective response was that their respective agencies wouldn't do it because it wasn't something that they'd ever seen done. They wouldn't know where to begin. That's not saying it couldn't be done. It would just be sort of I think the city of Loveland itself would sort of have to decide what exactly they want to be measuring. Do they want to be measuring potential impact on property values? Do they want to be measuring potential impact on crime? Do they want to be measuring, or is it all of the above? And just to be honest, we don't have the resources or time to be a part of that. That's not to say they shouldn't go do it. They can go do it if that's what they want to do. But yeah, we don't have the connections to anyone who does that sort of thing.
Can I ask a question, which I think you already answered, but I want to be really clear about it. Some of us were at that city council meeting where so many people came to address the homeless issue because the city council was going to decide, in theory, whether they would, change the rules, that they had to move a lot of us to the library because it took up so much space. And as soon as we got there, they said, one of the council members said, we need to do a study, let's defer this. And that was the end. So is there, I think you said no, but I want to know for sure. Is there a plan in the city council to go to do something new or research or do what they said that they needed to do that other people said has already been done or whatever?
Yeah, with that, it was deferred to a date uncertain, and by the date uncertain, that is really deferred indefinitely. And so this coming Tuesday night on February 25th, it's on City Council's agenda to be discussing homelessness and to be discussing the future of the Loveland Resource Center as well as the South Railroad facility. And so we anticipate that, first of all, that'll be a very interesting conversation to watch and to stay abreast of. And we anticipate, or we hope actually, that there is some sort of direction given so city staff knows what to do and what to expect and how to best serve their city. So I believe it will be addressed in that meeting. I would imagine, I don't know for certain, that it's just somewhat of a moot point right now since First Christian Church building has been taken off the table and that PUD has been pulled. CNY, I don't know if that's Cindy but regarding the $4 million donations, what will be done with those funds at this time? In working in the nonprofit world, it is extremely important to us that we honor the intent of the donations. So it's not just that there's $4 million floating around now with we can do whatever we want. So we value the relationships with our donors and we are good stewards of their money and we want to make sure that we're being respectful of that. And so there is conversation about can it be directed to other agencies or to other purposes or something like that. But the original intent of those funds was for an adult 24/7 resource center, and that is now off the table. And so it is up to those individual donors to decide what is to be done with those dollars.
And I think, and I think just as a really tangible point to make, the money is not in our bank account or anything like that. It's money that was pledged.
That's right.
So it's not, and then there's a question, can the city legally close the Railroad Avenue facility and maintain the camping ban? I honestly, if I'm giving an honest answer, it's yes, they can. The Supreme Court, in 2022, when the city first enacted its encampment ban, the sort of precedent was that you could not enact an encampment ban unless you provided an alternative place for people to be. And the Supreme Court has since overruled that in Boise versus Martin and said that you can do that. And some cities have moved in that direction. So yes, the city could legally close the Railroad Avenue facility and maintain the camping ban. We believe that would not, there's an obvious philosophical difference, and you will hear that reflected, I'm sure, in the city council meeting on the 25th, that you'll hear an argument that if we have services, that people are going to continue to be here, it'll get worse, that people will be attracted to the community. I will tell you, as an expert on homelessness and based on a ton of research on this issue, that is not the case. We will have people who are homeless in Loveland regardless. And even if we were to take that argument at its face value and say that there are people who come here for services, even if it was 25% of the people, it's not, but let's say it was 25% of the people in Loveland were not from Loveland and they came here for services, you're still left with a huge number of people. You're left with a huge number of people who are here locally. The biggest study that was done on that was done by University of California, San Francisco. It was one of the largest studies ever done of on the population of people experiencing homelessness over an extended period of time. And one of the things they looked at, because it's California and because California is a place where we sort of think people who are homeless move there for the weather, for services, for things like that, they really wanted to answer that question. And what they found in California was that about 90% of the people who became homeless, or sorry, who were homeless in California had become homeless in California. And within that, I can't remember the percentage. I'll put the study in I'll send the study along. The majority of those individuals were within the county where they became homeless. We don't have as robust data we're not nearly as big. We don't have, longitudinal data spanning, 15 years for Northern Colorado. But the data that we do have suggests something similar. And I just want to emphasize that's not to discount what people are saying when they're sort of rightly pointing out that people experiencing homelessness, I should say, and the issue of homelessness does have an impact on the surrounding community. Of course it does. That's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing in Loveland. And when we had meetings with the neighborhood, with the First Christian Church, the neighborhood, one of the things we heard loud and clear was that there are a lot of people experiencing homelessness already in that neighborhood, causing issues, just to be blunt. And I think the sort of solution to having people causing issues throughout a community who are homeless is to provide them with a place to be. South Railroad facility, or sorry, the Loveland Resource Center in particular during the day is just simply not large enough to accommodate the need. But then, of course, the counter argument to that from the neighborhood is that, okay, that might make it better for the community overall. Maybe the community overall will see less visibility in homelessness, but this neighborhood is going to be significantly worse. And so that was sort of the argument, the steps of the argument that we were running into.
I think it's also important to note, depending on which side of which philosophy you fall into regarding this topic, there is always money spent on a response to homelessness. Whether that is spent by supporting efforts that help people escape homelessness, or whether that is spent by for punitive responses. So it is. I think what the question that I would have is, if funding is decreased or potentially one or both of these facilities is eventually stopped, the police are going to become the main responders to homelessness. And right now they are also saying that they are understaffed, and not everything is a crime, right? Being homelessness is not a crime. Sitting in public places is not a crime. So there are definitely things that limit responses from that punitive side of things. And then I'm just going to go also and say that jails are not homeless shelters. There's not enough laws around that to keep someone in jail for the amount of time that they are homeless. So, Linda, regarding the results of the Loveland study, we are happy to share those, and I don't have a public format for that, but we'll figure out a way to do that and follow up with this group afterwards. But thank you for asking that.
Marilyn asked a question on can you describe housing first and treatment first system? So housing first is really just a philosophy that our goal as a homelessness response system should be to get people housed first. The basic belief is that, in order to solve sort of other issues in our lives, we need the stability of housing. That's the basic belief. So if I can't find a job, if I'm struggling with a disabling condition, if I'm struggling with substance use disorder, all of the various issues, domestic violence, all the various issues that cause people to become homeless, that it is far simpler and also far more cost effective in terms of reduced utilization of emergency services, hospitals, jails, et cetera, when people are homeless, to just provide people with housing first. Now, where we get into a misnomer about housing first is it doesn't just mean first housing. It doesn't just mean housing for everybody. What it means really is housing that is appropriate for everybody. So for the majority of people, that just means finding a place to live, paying for it, and living there forever. Or, well, I guess most people don't live in the same place forever, but living in, staying in housing. The goal of a homelessness response system is a weird way to say it, but it's really to provide the least amount of services possible to every individual in order to help them get housed and stay housed. And what that means is that when we have a project like St. Valentine's Apartments, which is permanent supportive housing, that is meant for people with disabling conditions, experiencing chronic homelessness, who need wraparound services in order to maintain housing, if not for their entire lives, probably for years. That is an expensive intervention. If we were to put an individual who just needs one-time rent assistance into a permanent supportive housing project, that would be an enormous waste of community resources. What we need to do is find the people who are utilizing $1 million a year of, jail and hospitals and all these costly community resources. That's who we try to place in St. Valentine. And then Housing First runs the entire gamut. So Housing First means that when somebody comes to us, the first thing we're trying to figure out is, if you're not homeless now, can we keep you in housing? Just one-time rent assistance. If you are homeless, can we quickly get you out of homelessness? Is there some family member who you can live with? Is there some way we can get you out of homelessness immediately? That is Housing First. So, neighbor to neighbor is a great example. By providing rent assistance to help people avoid homelessness, they are operating according to a Housing First philosophy, the idea that we need to keep people in housing for them to meet their basic needs and move forward in their lives. Treatment First, which I think, I've heard sort of, I think what you mean by this, and I've also heard it referred to as like Housing Fourth, or, things like that, is basically the idea that people need to get their ducks in a row before they're ready for housing. That's pretty much what it is. Treatment First, I think, specifically what you're hearing a lot now at the federal level, is that we need to mandate treatment for people. We need to, that we can't just let people be homeless, utilizing drugs in and out of the system, refusing services, that we need to force them to accept services, to accept help, and then get them into housing. So that's basically the difference. My own experience has obviously always been operating according to a Housing First model, and the projects that we're involved in that operate according to a Housing First model have helped thousands of people get housed and stay housed across Larimer County. The Monroe Elementary School is for sale. Is there any reason on purchasing it? Is that nonprofit?
So the Monroe Elementary building is for sale for $6.2 million, which is considerably more than the First Christian Church building was listed for. And that is another one of the reasons why the First Christian Church was pursued, because it was a more feasible option related to that. And it also was not available at the time that we were conducting this. So there was some other contracts on that, some other movement on that building. So, but it is for sale for a very nice $6.2 million. It is a very large facility. This was a Loveland shelter. It was a Noah regional shelter, because Fort Collins has for years had their own responses and services for homelessness. Greeley has their own, so this was intended just for Loveland, and that would be a really large facility for the need in Loveland, and not necessarily a very good use of community funds. How many beds at the
I
county?
apologize. I actually skipped over a question I did not mean to. Do the police have data on how much they spend on responding to homelessness? I haven't seen that at the local level. There's certainly been national level studies around how much police spend in various cities. I think the closest thing that I've seen to that locally would be, you can actually look you can do an inmate search in the Larimer County Jail and see them, and they have it actually on their website divided between people who are homeless or transient, and there is a difference in how they define those two things, and then people who are housed. So you can see that basically what you see is that the jail is the largest shelter in the county on a given night. And then how many beds of the county jail does Loveland have? I understand the answer is 2. Do you or anybody else know? That was my understanding, is that it was 2. Do you know, Sandra?
No, I don't even know if 2 is correct. I do know that there was some, not only with the county jail, but I also know that there was some arrangements made with Washington County, but the city would be the best answer for those questions. So,
Yes, jail is
David,
very expensive as shelter,
yeah.
indeed. Yeah.
David, can you also talk to, oh, this question has gone in and out of my mind, and it has to do with, related to local police calls, whether that's in Loveland, whether that's in Estes Park, whether that's in Fort Collins, Windsor, wherever that is. As far as like number 1 on the list is always Walmart's, right? As far as
yeah. Sorry, yeah, that is
can you talk to that item?
Yeah, that is actually part of and part of the answer to the question about how much the police spend. So yeah, in general, so if we look at the most commonly, the places that call police or emergency responders the most frequently, it is generally a mix of places, like Sandra said. There's there's a couple Walmarts and some areas down by like near I-25, some right when you get off I-25 at a couple of the exits, there's locations like that. And then a lot of homeless service locations. The majority of the homeless service locations, the calls, I should say, the majority of them are emergency responder calls, medical issues. But it would be disingenuous to say that homeless shelters are not a frequent caller of police services as well. I personally try. It's the way I think of it is through the lens of the Murphy Center, and I think of that because our agency's been operating the Murphy Center for 10 years, and we do work extremely closely with the police, and we call the police for assistance when there are issues that we just can't deal with on site that rise to a criminal in nature. It's a last resort when we do it, but we rely on it. And I think what I would say is that, of course, a homeless shelter is going to have a high concentration of calls. Of course, a resource center is going to have a high concentration of calls. We're serving 150 plus people a day at the Murphy Center with a variety of disabling conditions and mental health issues and substance use disorders. All sorts of issues that could theoretically lead to having to call both emergency responders and police. But at least we are in a facility that is designed to actually deal with those problems. We are in a facility that is staffed with Summit Stone Health Partners, mental health professionals, 4 of them on a day-to-day basis, with a physical health clinic, with case managers, with resource navigators, with security guards, with rules in place for how to deal with these sorts of things. So to me, it's sort of where do you want to be? Where do you want the problem? Do you want the problem in a place where people are equipped to handle it, or do you want to disperse throughout the community where police have to respond to it without assistance? And it's not that simple. You have a shelter. It's not like every single person who's homeless is going to be there all the time. You still need both. I think it's why street outreach programs, and one was just launched in Loveland, are so essential. It's why I think programs like the HOPE team in Fort Collins, which stands for Homeless Outreach Proactive Engagement, is a team that works specifically with people who are homeless. It's why I think programs like that are so wonderful, because they complement the shelters. When you have a robust system that's responding to the issue of homelessness across the entire community, both at locations where people go and places where people already are, you're not going to completely eliminate the impact of homelessness on the community, but you're going to substantially mitigate it relative to doing nothing.
And the HOPE team that David just mentioned is part of the police department there in Fort Collins. And then Loveland has a similar unit, a community impact unit, that has been very helpful and work with co-responders with Summit Stone and as far as responding to some different calls for concern. So there's a comment that police are always happy to drive individuals to open shelter. Yeah, there are some police departments that is the directives that they're given. That is not true of every community, but there are some communities that choose to deal with their problem of homelessness in that manner.
And I think I'm saying this because I actually don't have the temperature up in front of me right now, but I know it's close to 0 degrees right now, and I know that what happens on days like today is the shelters expand their capacity to the absolute maximum that they're allowed to. And if there are multiple shelters in a community, like there are in Fort Collins, they're going to be discussing to make sure that if one's at capacity and the other isn't, that they're communicating. And I think to CNY's point, police are really important on nights like tonight. They are out there engaging with people who are either opting to not stay in shelters for various reasons, or in some cases might be turned away from shelter due to capacity. And so I think it's a sad reality that on a night like tonight, you can bet a police officer is going to save a person's life who's homeless just by running into them.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. Bringing private donors put 2 people in motels this week. There are definitely possibly many on this call who who are actively engaged in helping to fill some gaps that are definitely present in our communities. So are there any other questions that we can answer related to the work that we do or what's taken place in Loveland?
I think a summary later to us of the things that we could do and of the resources that are available, what they do and where they are, just, would be helpful for our information so that we could provide information when it's needed and also help out.
Sure. We do have a Loveland resource guide as well as a Fort Collins resource guide that we're happy to share with you, and we can get that over to you for you to distribute to those on this call and to your membership. Thank you. Yeah, Linda,
I know we
heard that it
talked
was
about a
more than
number of
that,
documents.
so thank you,
Oh,
Linda.
sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Oh.
Linda, I heard that it was more than that, so thank you very much for recognizing that.
Oh,
Oh,
Marilyn wrote, what kind of role does safe parking play in helping
Yeah,
those?
yeah, great questions.
Go ahead, Sandra.
Safe parking in Loveland is an initiative that was started by the faith community, and they work hand in hand with case management and house enabling service. It's with the different services provided for people experiencing homelessness, we like to come at it with a no wrong door. If someone is seeking help, we want to be able to meet them directly there in their need. And so if someone is living in a car and needing just some temporary support that way, it's a really excellent way to do that. And anything that we can do, and David, maybe you can speak a little bit more to this too, to have shelter diversion. We don't want people being in shelters. We have a very active engagement. Is there anywhere else that you can go? Can you be reunited with family or friends and would you have a place to stay over your head? Can we, of course, we vet that process, right? We're not just shipping people off to other communities to make it to be their problems, because that's not the philosophy that we agree with. But what can we do for any sort of shelter diversion? Can we make sure that if there's an eviction happening, can we intervene ahead of time? David, do you want to?
Yeah, basically
diversion
is just a strategy for excuse me, it's a strategy for intervening before a person enters the homelessness response system to see if you can solve the issue before they actually have to stay in a shelter. And it's based on, the idea that is well proven that it's cheaper to prevent homelessness than it is to help someone escape homelessness. Once someone becomes homeless, it's a lot harder. And so what that looks like is really what Sandra said. For us, what it looks like is we have a questionnaire and we go through with people to identify any possible resources to help them avoid whatever situation they're coming to us in. Sometimes, I mean, it's obviously not possible in every situation. It depends. I've seen various studies on it, but just based on the number of people that we're diverting out of homelessness at intake, I think that the closest number I've seen is about 10% or so of people could theoretically be diverted out of homelessness if communities had the resources to do it. Usually it's one-time rent assistance. Sometimes it's landlord mediation. Sometimes it's what Sandra said, it's reuniting family, people with family members who are who they're able to live with permanently. That's one of the rare cases where we actually will buy a ticket for someone to leave town, as if they have a actual home to go to somewhere else with family members or friends who will support them.
Linda, Safe Park helps 4 to 5 people who have cars. I believe that is 4 to 5 cars, and that can be up to 12 people or something like that. So just for a little bit of clarification, last time I spoke with the executive director of House Enabling Service, I believe that's what she shared with me.
And I've also heard that there are efforts to expand safe parking in Fort Collins and at Colorado State University. I don't know where those are in discussions, but I'm not a part of them, but I've heard inklings.
Any further questions?
Thanks for the
Well,
great discussion, great questions. Really appreciate everybody's comments, questions. Just great to talk to everybody.
We really, really appreciate the work that you're doing. It is so important and so complex. And we appreciate your sharing the information about what you're doing with us, and we will try to follow up when we learn more about, the resources so that we can give people information and help out ourselves.
Thank you. We appreciate being here and we appreciate the candid discussion as well.
Thank you so much.